Hi, I'm Jen Girardi, and I support unconventional humans to lead deeply fulfilling lives. And today we're going to talk about attachment, and specifically, we're talking about attachment in new relationships. So, this is going to apply most directly to new romantic relationships, dating someone new, but it would also apply to any kind of relationship, a friendship, um, anything where you're going to try to increase the level of vulnerability in the relationship. So, most people watching this are probably familiar with the basic idea of attachment theory and that the responsiveness of caregivers in the first couple of years of life has this impact on how our nervous systems view normal in relationships, what's safe, what's not safe, what do we need to do to stay in connection. And then that can translate into our adult relationships, particularly romantic relationships, and all of the ways that that can um, make it hard to have distance, have separation from somebody, or hard to get close and vulnerable with somebody, or how both of those things can feel hard or dangerous, or ideally, in a secure attachment, how both of those things can feel safe. And so, if you're familiar with this idea, one of the things that comes up a lot in adult relationships is that you don't necessarily have an attachment with somebody at first. So you may come to this idea you're already in a long-term relationship and you're looking at what is the attachment pattern in that relationship. But if you're not, or if that changes at some point, or you're exploring a new relationship, it can be a question of like, well, how do I figure out whether I can have a secure attachment with this person? How do I figure out whether this person is safe? And if I start to feel some kind of fear come up or some anxiety come up, um, is that my attachment patterns coming up, or is that something that is warranted by what's happening in the relationship? Is it me or is it them? Kind of questions. And is it a problem or not? You know? So we're going to talk about that. How do you evaluate that today? And there's three parts: there's your work, there's naming it, and there's testing it. So, starting with your work, which you're probably already doing if you're familiar with attachment and you're here watching this, but that is getting familiar with your own history and your own patterns and what does come up for you um, in general, so that when things come up in a specific relationship, you have a bit of an ability starting out to say, okay, is this familiar? Does this seem like the thing that I have dealt with in the past? In which case, it's more likely that it's your stuff. Or does this feel different? In which case, it might be more likely that there's something happening in the relationship that's bringing it up. And doing your own work, there can also be pieces in there about like what makes it harder for you, what makes it easier for you. Are there specific things that might trigger some kind of a response in you? So the more you know yourself and the more you know your own history and patterns, the more you can evaluate what's happening for you, your own experience in present time. And then so the second piece of that is naming it. And this is a part, particularly for people with avoidant attachments, where the vulnerability is the hard part, that can be really hard. It can be hard also if you're worried about being judged, or if you're worried that like having attachment needs makes you less desirable. Um, so naming it doesn't mean like that you have to name like the worst fears that you're having necessarily, but you can name pieces of your history. Something like I sometimes feel I have some insecurities about being rejected, and it would be really helpful for me if I could like check in with you, just see how you're doing, send you a text if I haven't seen you or talked to you in a few days. um, that kind of thing. Naming what is it that would be helpful to you. So then you have to look back at that first part, the self knowledge, and say, okay, well, what do we learn from the self knowledge part? What is it that you need? What is it that's helpful? What is it that makes you feel safer in a relationship? Whether that's a little bit more reassurance of closeness, or whether it's a little bit more reassurance that you don't have to talk to somebody constantly, or whether it's some kind of predictability in the communication, whatever it is that you need, naming those things then to someone. And, depending on your history and on your needs, maybe that's something that you even put in a dating profile, or you talk about right up front if there are things that are like hard lines, deal breakers. If this is going to be a problem for you, I'm out. If there are things that are that important, then yeah, communicate them right up front. If it's more like something comes up as you're starting to get to know somebody, where you're starting to feel like some anxiety about whether they're going to text you back or something, then it could be helpful to name. I sometimes feel a little bit of anxiety about whether you're going to text me back, and it would be helpful. Um, maybe the ask would be like, it would be helpful if you could give me a little bit of information about what your day is like. Is it that like you're slammed all day at work, you're never looking at your phone, so it's totally not me? Is it that you hate texting, and you're just don't respond to anybody by text? How Whatever it is that you need and ask for reassurance about, that you're going to get your needs met, naming that and asking for it. And again, tying it back to the self knowledge, having enough knowledge of your own patterns and history is really important to understanding um, whether what you're asking for is a reasonable accommodation, or whether it's um, whether you're in a space of you're on your growing edge, you're exploring what it would be like to be in relationship in a new pattern, and asking for the help that you need to be able to do that, or whether this is a and a pattern that's no longer helpful, that is coming out, and there might be some work for you to do about what's coming up for you and how to support yourself. So that's the, again, tying back to the self-knowledge piece, the differentiating. Is this something that is appropriate to ask my partner to help with, or somebody, a friend, whoever the person is that you're hoping to open some vulnerability? That is a piece of vulnerability, is asking for what you need and seeing whether they're able to meet it, um, as long as it's an appropriate thing that is part of their role in your life to meet. And if it's not, then it might be that there's some piece of what's coming up for you, your own history, that you're having an opportunity to look at freshly and process in a different way. In which case you might need a layer of support, professionally, or from a friend, or somebody who can listen to you, who is not the person who's bringing up the insecurities. And then uh, the last part is the testing, and the testing is where we start to, we have, once we've gotten the clarity on like, this is me, this is my stuff, and this is what I need in order to feel safe in a relationship. And then the testing part is the little bids for, can you get your needs met? Are those things that you need to feel safe in relationship present with this person? So the naming it is that is a first layer of that. If I ask for what I need, what happens? What's the response from this other person? And that will give you information about their attachment patterns as well as your own. So if what you're asking for is not getting met, then we can go back to evaluating, okay, is it not getting met because what I was asking for isn't really an appropriate thing to ask for from this person? Is that not their role? Or is it that there's something about their own history, their own patterns that they're not able to meet that need? And if that's the case, then what does that mean for my willingness to participate in the relationship? So, um, the reason I'm recording this is because I often get asked things about, like, how do you know if it's safe enough to really open up and get vulnerable with somebody? Or how do you know if if this is a relationship in which you can have a secure attachment or an earned secure attachment if you didn't grow up with a secure attachment to a caregiver? And the answer to that is that you don't jump in feet first, you know, dumping everything, all the vulnerability all at once. The answer to that is that you test little by little, um, and not. It's really important that this is. I want you to hear that this is not testing in um, a manipulative, like, I'm going to set up a test for you and see whether you pass or fail kind of thing. It's more of a, like, okay, does it feel safe enough to share just a little bit more of myself and see what happens? And then evaluating what happens, not with a right or wrong, not with a you passed or you failed kind of idea, but more of a, what kind of information do I get from that? Um, so, you know, it might be sharing something that makes you nervous, or something that's a fear or insecurity, or asking a question. Sometimes this will come up in a new relationship when you have some curiosity about something, and it feels a little scary to bring it up, or when there's something that has bothered you a little bit and there's a fear to talk about it, because there's a fear of, like, if I initiate this, is that going to be a big fight? Are we going to break up? Am I going to be rejected? Um, and of course, what we want with somebody that we're into is to stay in connection, right? But that's where all of those attachment wounds came from in the first place, is trying to stay in connection, and what has to happen to stay in connection. And so it's really important as an adult that we change that lens to, instead of what do I have to do to stay in connection, the question of, is this a good person for me to be in connection with? And especially early on in the relationship, when there's um, less time and energy and history devoted to that person, it's easier to say no. It's easier to walk away from it if it's not a good connection. So instead of evaluating, like, oh, I guess I need to make sure that I never bring up things that annoy me about this person, because if I bring it up, we're going to have a fight. We might break up. Instead of that, thinking, um, maybe I want to be able to bring up an annoyance with a partner and work through that and not have to hide it. So this, either there might need to be some more conversation about how we can do that, or maybe this isn't the person. So in a new relationship, we really want to be evaluating, um, is there safety to, those are all parts of vulnerability. Naming our own fears and insecurities is vulnerable, but so is opening the potential for rejection by opening a conversation that might be hard, or um, bringing up something that has potential for conflict, and seeing how well we can navigate a conversation about something that might be challenging, because those things are going to happen. Those things are going to happen, and those opportunities are going to come up. It's not manufacturing a test. It's paying attention to what opportunities come up to navigate potential challenges, and the test part is the like, does it feel safe enough to take the step into that uncomfortable place and see what happens, see how this person responds to that discomfort. And if it doesn't feel safe enough, then that's also information. And then, with whatever information there is, whether it goes easily, whether it feels difficult, whether someone's unwilling to go there at all of that, then we can circle back around and say, okay, is that about me or is that about them? Or is it something about the relationship? And what does it mean for my ability to get my needs met and the potential for connection here and my willingness to continue to participate in the relationship? So I hope that helps to make it a little bit less confusing, the idea of how do we go from point A to point B, right? We go from point A is like, I understand that what I'm looking for in a healthy relationship and a healthy connection with somebody. And I know that it looks like this deep connection and vulnerability, and also being distinctly separate people still. And like, how do we get, how do we get there? How do we make that actually happen in a relationship? Because that takes time. It takes time and it takes building trust. And that's what the building trust looks like is those um, little steps of, and then evaluating how was that, what was that like for me, and what do I need to continue to move forward. Um, as always, if you have questions, you can put them in the comments. You can check out my website and contact me there as well. And I look forward to connecting with you again soon.